College Football 25 is set to be released in less than 10 days if you have one of the pre-ordered editions. Can't wait. It's going to be here before you know it. But today, I'm going to go over 10 criteria and things to consider when choosing your Dynasty team. So let's just hop straight into these 10 items, and I will go into each one in detail. And this is all based on the info that has been revealed to the community through the Dynasty Deep Dive and also the presentation Deep Dive as well. So number one, choosing your coaching route. There are obviously two different types of dynasties you can start with. First is a head coach and second is a coordinator. A head coach is pretty straightforward. You choose your team and basically take over everything for that school. Now, one difference in this year's game as opposed to NCAA 14, when you do choose a coordinator, you can actually play both sides of the ball. But for realistic sake, what you can do is still super sim the other side of the ball. Let's just say you choose an offensive coordinator. When you get into the game, just choose offensive plays and play on offense and then super sim defense. You can go that route, but you do have the ability to play both sides of the ball out of the box. But let's just talk about coordinating. And this is one of the things that makes this game so great, and it's the coaching carousel. They said that basically, when you have a coordinator and a scheme attached to your coach, teams that are interested in you will be teams likely lined with your school. So you're not going to run a spread type of attack and expect Army to offer a coaching job to you. It's just not going to happen. So I'm going to give you two routes to consider when choosing a coordinator to start your dynasty and eventually graduating to a head coach. The first one is starting out as a G5 offensive coordinator. I'm just going to use offensive coordinator as the example here. Then graduating to maybe a lower tier P4 offensive coordinator. So let's just say a small school like, I don't know, like Wake Forest or something like that. Then going to a G5 head coach, which means you go back to the group of five, take over as the head coach. Then you would graduate maybe to a lower tier P4 head coach. So now, since you've already been a coordinator at Illinois or Wake Forest, for example, now you may be the head coach there. And then graduating to a higher tier P4 head coach. So now we're talking about the SEC schools, the Big Tens, the Wisconsins, Michigans, Ohio States maybe one day. And that would be kind of your path to your coaching career. The second path I have is a lot shorter, and this one goes from being a G5 offensive coordinator to a G5 head coach, and then graduating directly to a P4 head coach wherever you want to go. So the second path is a lot shorter, maybe less realistic, but the first path is a lot longer. So those are some example paths you can take. Number two is choosing your recruiting methodology. Now, there are two ways to recruit in this game. It has been confirmed that JUCOs are in the game, and those will be lumped in within the high school recruits. So are you going to first decide, do I want to hit the transfer portal hard or recruit at the high school or JUCO level? Let's just talk about the benefits of both. First, let's talk about high school and the JUCOs. In this type of model, you have a chance to develop players. So when you start your dynasty, you might want to start as a motivator to get the most out of your recruits. Especially if you're recruiting a lot of 2-star or 3-star prospects, it's going to be very, very important to develop guys. Those are probably going to be guys that are less likely to transfer away from your school, strictly because if you do recruit a 5-star or 4-star, their expectations are going to be a lot higher. They're going to be a lot more impatient. But with the 2 stars, 3 stars, and even 1-star guys, you can develop those guys and basically allow your program to grow organically. Now let's talk about the flip side, recruiting through the transfer portal. There have obviously been a lot of schools that have gone this route. Even at the G5 level, there have been a lot of smaller schools that have grabbed a lot of the Power 5 guys that have maybe flamed out at Power 5, want to go back down to G5. Will you choose to recruit more of the the juniors and the seniors coming over from other schools. It's going to be a lot of fun seeing the two kind of compete against one another, because really recruiting in both areas is going to be tough this year, because you're going to have to make a decision on, do I spend all my time going after some transfer portal guy that's going to help me out right away, or do I go after maybe a high school guy that's got really high potential, but his impact may be down the road? So you're going to have to decide there. Maybe a mix of the two is your decision, or maybe you lean heavily towards one or the other. So the number 3 thing you should consider when choosing your dynasty is the stadium size. I'm going to mostly focus on G5 schools, because if you choose to be a head coach at a G5 and you definitely want to work your way up to being one of the toughest places to play, that's going to be a consideration. And looking at G5 schools, they're mostly smaller. Power 5 schools mostly have stadiums that can hold at least 50,000, but I'm going to talk about one of the bigger G5 schools to consider as far as stadium size goes. So first is ECU. I've seen ECU talked about on Reddit, all across YouTube. ECU is probably going to be a popular choice because of their uniform combination, but their stadium holds 50,000, which is really, really big as far as G5 schools go. The second school to consider is UAB. 47,000 capacity. And the thing about UAB Stadium is they had that stadium built in 2021. So it is fairly new. So that is one of the newer stadiums to start with in this game. Number 3 is UTEP. UTEP Stadium holds 51.5 thousand capacity, a very large stadium, and you're in the state of Texas as well. And then my last school I will mention here, there's a lot more, but UNLV, you have the state of Nevada at your disposal. 40,000 seats in the stands at Sam Boyd Stadium. Another big stadium to consider if you're starting with a G5 school. Number 4 thing to consider is proximity to coach pipelines. They added this to the game, but one thing that has changed from this game, from NCAA 14, is you can no longer gain pipeline states. Well, what does that mean? Well, that means that you're probably going to have to get some coordinators or recruits in states where your coordinators do have those pipeline connections. So now when you hire an offensive or a defensive coordinator, they have a pipeline state attached to them. Let's just say your coordinators are attached in Texas and Florida. Well, you're set up pretty well, because Texas and Florida have the best recruits in the country. So that means that now you're going to be able to recruit with the speed out of Florida and the size and the athleticism of Texas. So it's going to be a lot of fun. Really, that chess game of recruiting in this game, you definitely want to choose a school that has proximity to those coach pipelines, and make sure you're hitting those pipelines very hard, because you cannot acquire pipelines any longer. So really, the state that you're in is going to be important, and then those pipelines for each coach. So number 5 thing to consider is choosing a school who changed conferences in the last couple of years. Obviously, the college football landscape has changed a lot, and I'm just going to give you a couple of examples of schools that have changed schools or changed conferences over the last few years, or even this coming season. First, my number 1 is UCLA. They joined the Big Ten after not winning a Pac-12 title at all. They won the Pac-10 back in 1998, but that was along with some other good schools, but never great schools seasons that they've had. UCLA is just an interesting team, a California school going over into the Big Ten. I wonder how they're going to adjust to Big Ten football. It's a lot different than what you see out on the West Coast. So that would be an interesting school to take over. And you'd also have Eric Bieniemy for the first time as an offensive coordinator at the college level as well. And they have a first-time head coach there also. Number 2 I have on this list is Cal. Cal joins the ACC. Just a interesting move for them. They go from California to the ACC. Travel is going to be tough for them. If they have to travel and go on the road in seasons to come, it's going to be a tough adjustment. And I know it's something small, traveling, but trust me, it definitely affects the away team if you have to travel a long way, because that travel back home is going to be a long trip if you lose. But they won the Pac-8 in 1975 and Pac-10 in 2006, and now they joined the ACC. Couple of Big 12 schools I have on this list. Colorado, obviously they are polarizing, but they will probably be a popular rebuild here in college football 25. They return after, like a decade of being in the Pac-12 or so. And then Arizona State, they also joined the Big 12. That will be a challenge going to the Big 12 for them. And then my last team on the list, I have Stanford joining the ACC, another California school. One thing you will have riding for you for Stanford is that their academic prestige should be an A+. So that will help in recruiting, especially when you're recruiting those guys that have that motivation of academic prestige. Number 6 on the list, I have pick a school with no FBS success. So these would be teams that are either newer to the FBS or just haven't had much success since joining the FBS. I have a few teams on this list. First is Charlotte. They have been 32-71 in the FBS. They joined the American in 2023 last season and have not had a winning season since 2019. And you're going to be in North Carolina, where you have to compete with NC State, UNC, and all those other schools on the East Coast. FIU is my second school here in this category, 81-154 in the FBS. They have not had a winning record since 2018. And they are really starving for any type of success. They have some great jerseys, so you'll have that riding for you. Kennesaw State, they're probably going to be more of a popular team. They're joining the FBS for the first time this year. And one thing to watch out for with them, they're going to be a bad team. They went 3-6 last year in the FCS. So joining the FBS, it's going to be an uphill battle. And then lastly here, I have Georgia State. They've actually been decent. In winning seasons, they've actually gone 4-2 in bowl games. But the thing is, when they're not making a bowl game, they're really, really bad. They have a career winning percentage of 36%. So if you're picking Georgia State, you're obviously going to have to compete with Auburn, with Southern, and also Georgia, the Bulldogs as well. So you're going to have some tough games there in the Sun Belt also, because the Sun Belt, the Fun Belt for a reason. It's going to be a tough road to win a championship in that conference. All right, number 7 here. How about considering picking a forgotten P4 school? I have a couple of teams in each Power 4 conference that I want to list off here. In the Big 10, Northwestern, Indiana, Purdue, Minnesota, and Rutgers. The most notable one I want to consider here is the closest team to probably getting over the hump in the Big 10 is probably Minnesota. But remember, divisions are gone from the major Power 4 schools, I should say, Power 4 conferences. The only conference to still have divisions is the Sun Belt. But if you're going into the Big 10, remember, you have to finish as a top 2 school in the conference in order to make the conference championship. Something to consider, no more divisions. That means that schedules are going to be a lot more fun in the Big 10, and they are the biggest conference right now in the FBS. In the SEC, you might be considering Vandy or South Carolina, teams like that. Vandy has absolutely been terrible in the SEC, but I mean, good luck with them. And especially since now Texas and Oklahoma join the SEC, 2 more tough teams. I mean, it's going to be an uphill battle for Vanderbilt. In the Big 12, I have Cincinnati, BYU, Baylor, Texas Tech. Some schools here are very intriguing because a team like Texas Tech or Baylor could eventually join the SEC if you decide to go that route. So that could be a fun storyline, graduating to the SEC just like Oklahoma and Texas did. And then in the ACC, you have Wake Forest and Boston College. There are some more schools here in the ACC, but those are the 2 notable ones. Boston College hasn't won in a very long time, and neither has Wake Forest. Wake Forest had a couple of good seasons, though, between 2010 and 2020, but it's still going to be a tough battle for them in that conference. Number 8, pick a team to get over the hump. These are teams that have been pretty good, just haven't been college football playoff bound yet. And let's just talk about a few of those. I have 5 listed here, all for different reasons too. First is 1000% Miami. The Hurricanes obviously were one of the, I would say, favorite and most hated teams since the year 2000. We obviously know the story history with them. They have been a recruiting hotbed, but really their recruiting success has not translated to on-field success. So that is just one storyline. Can they finally put it together after a disastrous season really just a year ago? Number 2 team I have on this list is Wisconsin. Wisconsin is always good. They just can't get over that hump. The last time I've seen them really be, elite was back when they had Russell Wilson. And that has been over 12, 13 years ago now. It's just insane. And now I think it's time for them to really show up and really cement themselves in the Big Ten. But it's going to be tough. You now have Washington. You now have Oregon. You still have Ohio State. You still have Michigan. And wow, it's just going to be tough for them. And I think this is just an intriguing build here to get over that hump with the Badgers. Number 3, I have Syracuse. Syracuse was a team just a few years ago that would have been a total rebuild, but they have actually been pretty competitive the last couple of seasons. Could this team finally get over the hump and get to an ACC championship game? Obviously, no more divisions in the ACC, so it's going to be tough, but I like this team as a middle-of-the-pack team to possibly surprise a lot of teams this season. Number 4, I have Arizona with Noah Fifita at quarterback. I think they have high expectations going in. I've seen a lot of, preseason rankings lists, and they are definitely one of the sleepers. They could be really, really good this year in the Big 12. And then number 5, I have Iowa. Iowa may be the most intriguing team on this list because Iowa has an amazing defense. You know what you're going to get with their defense. They are just an elite level defense, pretty much top 5 in the country every single season. But then their offense, just absolutely horrible. I don't know how this team is going to do this year, just based on that strictly, but we know their defense is going to be elite. The number 9 thing to consider when starting your dynasty, the difficulty of the conference. Obviously, when you have a Power 5 school and you go to a Power 4 conference, I keep saying Power 5. I gotta get used to saying Power 4. But obviously, those conferences are more difficult. But with difficulty adds a much more dynamic to your dynasty, because not only are you trying to compete with the best schools on the field, but you're also trying to recruit against them as well. And seeing a team, a school like maybe let's just say in the SEC, Mississippi State, you're obviously right in the middle of a state and a region that is just king to recruiting. But then on top of that, you have Georgia right next to you. You have Florida right next to you. You have all the Texas schools right next to you. Like, it's going to be difficult to really rebuild this school to be elite. Even if you have a good recruiting class, it does not guarantee it, because it's not like these Alabamas and Auburns are getting worse. They're also getting better along with you. So that's one thing to consider, the difficulty of the conference. And when you're talking about G5 schools as well, I would lean against maybe a softer conference, kind of like, sorry, MAC, but the MAC conference is probably right now, or the Conference USA, the worst G5 conferences right now. If you're looking for a difficult conference, if you want a hard rebuild, maybe choose one of the worst teams in the Sun Belt, or one of the worst teams in the American, or even the Mountain West at that. The Mountain West is pretty competitive right now. I think one thing that with the Mountain West is, where do you go when you've been dominating the Mountain West? Do you go to the Big 12? Do you make one of those weird geographic moves like Cal made and Stanford made over to the ACC? Or do you just kind of, stay in kind of that region? I don't know, but that's something to consider as well, when you're moving and promoting to a new conference and switching teams around to new conferences as well. So the last criteria I have on this list is the easiest criteria I could put on here, and that is picking your favorite team. This is a no-brainer. We haven't had a college football game in over 11 years. We are just over a week away. And if you are a football fan like me, you just want to load up the game, see what your team is like, go ahead and do it. It is your playground. I'm excited for everybody, not just myself. I'm excited for the whole community. We finally get this game back. Pick your favorite team, build them up. The only thing is, if your favorite team is Ohio State or Michigan or something like that, I mean, you can do it. It just maybe won't be as enjoyable. You're already going to have all the work pretty much done for you. You just need to pretty much exist on the field. So if your favorite team is, a middle tier team, you're going to have a lot more fun. And then obviously if your favorite team is a lower tier team, you're going to have a big rebuild ahead of you. But it is what you want to do. Your series and your dynasties and your legacies are what you make it. Pick your favorite team, see what they are in the game. And one thing that has been coming out lately is the player ratings are pretty on par with pretty much what a video game should be. There aren't any 99 overall teams. We know that for a fact. There are going to be pretty much no 99 overall players, which is awesome too, because you want to be able to develop into being an elite level player. And I think the player ratings are getting leaked right now. We can see that even like elite players in the league are pretty much like low 90s, which is awesome, because that pretty much says like, hey, if you want to be an elite player in the NCAA, you really got to work your way to being, a high overall. And I like that because it pretty much creates that gap between the great teams and the bad teams. So it also gives you something to work towards. Like, can you become a 99? I don't know, but it's a nice challenge to have in Dynasty. And I am very excited to pick up and start this game. So there you have it, 10 things to consider when choosing your Dynasty team. I hope I helped you in this video and gave you some scenarios to think about. And make sure to stay tuned to my channel. I will be running a Dynasty. I have literally just picked the team, so I will not be revealing that, but I will have a Dynasty on this channel. Make sure you stay tuned for more news on this channel as it comes out, and then obviously videos like this where I give you tips on the upcoming game. So hope you guys enjoyed the video. Hit subscribe, hit that like button, stay tuned. Let's get it. Let's go.